Hello, I'm Jerry Crosby, and I'm here with the Chico Steak Life Sketches webcast. And I'm honored today to be interviewing one of my favorite people, Donna Hawkley. She has been instrumental in my life, in my family's life, and in the life of many other people for almost 96 years. So we've got a lot to talk about, and it's going to be great. Can you begin by telling us a little bit about where you were born and your childhood?
Yes, I was born in Pocatello, Idaho, March 4th, 1928, in the St. Mary's Hospital. But I only lived there for 6 months, and then my family moved to Idaho Falls, and that's my hometown.
And what was Idaho Falls like in the 1930s?
Well, I really don't remember an awful lot, the early 30s, but the later 30s. It was during the Depression and stuff like that, and it was a wonderful hometown. And when we moved to Chico, we felt like Chico was almost the same size as Idaho Falls, and they have grown together the same way. It was a wonderful, Idaho Falls is a wonderful place.
Well, given that today's children are all on iPhones and video games, what did you do to entertain yourself as a child?
Oh, my goodness. We used to play marbles, and we used to play kick the can and Annie I over and that type of thing. We would listen to radio programs and compare our notes on the cereals that were given and stuff like that. And we used to have the neighborhood kids would come and sit in our front yard, and we would tell ghost stories at night. We created our own entertainment.
Yes, and when you talk about cereals, you want to explain to the young people who've never heard that term what a cereal is.
Well, it's like a program. It's kind of like some of the programs on TV, like you would watch a continuing story, so you could hardly wait till the next week to get the next episode.
Yeah, and some of them were westerns, and some of them were mysteries, but
Yes.
they were the sitcoms of the radio.
We had one that was called the Lux Theater, so that was an evening show. And then we had comedian ones like Fibber McGee and Molly, and those Amos and Andy, stuff like that.
Very fun. Did you ever get yourself in any trouble?
Unfortunately, I did get enough. As long as I behaved myself, I was okay. But there were times that, once I got out of the house, they wouldn't know what I was doing.
So what kind of things did you guys do that your parents didn't know about?
Well, one of the things is through the alley, there was a man that was an egg representative, and he always would bring home eggs that were close to rotten. So he would put them out in the alley, and then we would sneak down the alley, and then we would throw the eggs on the back of his garage, stuff like that.
And was there a curfew? Did you guys get to stay out at night? What was that like?
When I was really young, or what age do you want to know?
Well, I guess it changes, right? So if you were 14, 15, was there still a curfew, or by that time were you kind of a young adult?
Yes, I really was kind of a young adult. Yeah, my parents always wanted me home by 10.
And you were a cheerleader in high school, yes? And what was that like?
That was wonderful. There were 4 of us. They had the 2 seniors, a boy and a girl, and then the junior and sophomore. And it was wonderful. It was so fun. What was really fun is at that time I worked in the theater, in the Paramount Theater, and they provided uniforms for you. And so I felt like a movie star. And we were usherettes, and they had a big circle as you came into the theater, and then they would say, the person was the leader, that as you walked in, there would be 3 in your party, so that we would signal there were 3, and then there were usherettes on each aisle with their flashlights. And so that was fun when you got to raise your finger, 3 people on aisle 2 and that type of thing. And then the usherettes, we would take our flashlights and seat them.
And going to the movie was a much more formal affair at that time.
Yeah.
Like you wouldn't have gone in your hoodie and your pajama bottoms.
No. You could go for 10 cents until you were 12.
Uh-huh.
And then it was 25 cents.
Now, as an usherette, did you guys, because I've seen pictures of them, like, presenting food down the aisles, you know?
No, we didn't do that.
But you did seat them because seats were assigned at that point in time. And like we said, you were kind of already a young adult. How many jobs did you have while you were still in high school?
When I was in high school, I worked right after school, I worked at Chris's. It's a 5 and dime store. And I worked there, and then when I got off there, I went to the theater and then worked till the late shift. And then on the weekends, I kept books for a paint store.
So you had 3 different jobs.
And
while you were in high school.
On all the games.
You were a cheerleader, and I bet you still had good grades.
I did. I was all right.
That does not surprise me in the least.
I passed.
And so, were you always kind of that career-minded girl, like you were ready to be out in the big world?
Well, my parents taught us how to work, and I only have one sister. There's just the 2 of us, and we took responsibility in the home and in the yard and everything like that. And so, when I was old enough to get a job, I wanted to pay for my own clothes and stuff like that. So, I was motivated to work.
And did having a childhood during the Depression play a part in that?
I'm sure it is, because we saved everything. I know we didn't have cupboards in one place that we lived, and Mother said, oh, we can make cupboards out of orange crates. So we did. We put little curtains around them, and so actually when Monty and I got married, we at one time we were in an apartment with no cupboards, and I knew what to do.
There you go. And I'm so glad you brought up Monty. So how does Monty come into the Donna story? Monty being your husband.
Well, he was in the service, and he was home on leave. I was in high school my senior year, and he was home on leave and going to be deported or sent
Deployed.
to Japan.
Yeah.
And then he was home to see his folks before he was on leave, and he came to a basketball game, and I was cheerleading. And so he told his sister he wanted to date me. And so she called me, and I said, my parents don't let me go on a blind date, and I don't know him, so I can't do that. And so she kept calling, and finally Mother says, well, who is that? And I said, well, it's this Monty Hawkley. And she said, oh, the Hawkley, you can go with him. We know the Hawkleys. And so I went to the game that night, and his sister showed me who he was across on the other side, and I watched him all night. And the wrong man came up to me. The man I watched was about 6'2", and Monty came up and touched my shoulder, and I turned and looked up, and then I looked down. But that was really funny. And the really funny part that we learned later, my mother and his mother worked in primary together, and they were in a primary meeting, and I was a baby, and I was making a big noise, and so his mother said, Monty, why don't you push the buggy, take Donna for a little walk? So I met him early.
So your first date was when you were still in a carriage.
Yeah.
I like that.
I do.
And what was your first impression of Monty?
Oh, it was really good. He just treated me really nice, and I was very happy with being treated like a lady. But we went on a date that night with his buddies, and they were all 5 years older than I was. So I was with the older group.
Now, did you feel comfortable with the older group, or did you feel like the baby with them?
No, I really didn't, because he treated me so well, and it was nice. We went bowling with this group, and he had to bowl with his left hand because he was injured in the war as a Purple Heart. and and his arm wasn't strong enough to bowl, but that was fun.
Yeah, it must have been difficult working your way through, in your earlier childhood, through the Depression, and then in your teenage years through a world war. Your generation has been through a lot.
Yeah, and consequently, you don't have a lot of money, but you don't need a lot of money to be happy.
No, you don't. And I think that's one of the really great things that from the greatest generation we've learned. How much did you make on your first job?
25 cents an hour.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
And so then you were engaged while still in high school. Is that correct?
Yes, I was engaged in April 5th.
Mm-hmm. And was that particularly unusual?
I had just turned 18.
Oh, okay.
In March, so.
And was that considered unusual to be engaged in high school, or
there were a couple that it was. We did marry younger in those days. But I had a lot of responsibility, and I knew how to do wifely stuff. My grandchildren don't. When they were that age, I thought, oh my goodness, I can never see you married at this time.
What's one of your best courtship stories with Monty?
Well, one of the funniest ones was he would always come down to the theater to get me when I would get off work. And we had to walk. We didn't have cars. His parents didn't have a car. And my dad had a paint truck, and that's what we had, but we walked everywhere. And so we were walking home from the theater one night, and there was a big clap of thunder, and all of a sudden I found myself flat on the sidewalk facing Monty. He had put his arm on me and threw me to the ground because he had been in the service. And I looked at him with big eyes, and he looked at me, and he said, "I'm so sorry." And I understood.
Yeah.
And that was one of the funny things that we laughed about a lot, that the time that Monty threw me on the sidewalk.
Yes, but he was protective, so that's all good.
He was, yeah.
Did he have a good proposal story?
Well, yes, I thought it was good, but his mother had it planned different. She wanted him to take me to the Idaho Falls Temple and propose to me there. But I was in an exhibition assembly I was in a dance thing that I did at one of the junior highs. And so he came up from Pocatello to watch. And as he walked in, he knelt down by my mother and said, "I'm going to propose to Donna tonight. Is that okay?" And so he didn't ask my dad, he asked my mother. So on the way home, we had to walk from the school to get home. And that night was a school, a big party where they had, everybody came to like I don't know what you would call it, but it was a big dance and a party. And on the way home, I guess the ring burned a hole in his pocket, and it started to rain, and he just stopped right in the middle of the block and proposed to me in the rain.
And did you make him wait, or did you instantly say yes?
Oh, I instantly said yes.
Yeah, pretty smitten by that time.
It was really sweet. And that night, I wore my ring on a necklace because it was too big. And now I wear his ring, and he's always with me.
Yeah. Yeah. You must be missing him.
Yeah.
So, how was it like being a young married couple at university and kind of trying to work through that? Nowadays, people want to wait to start families or to start relationships, but you were right in the thick of it.
Yeah, that's true. And Monty had switched from BYU to Pocatello, so he would be closer to me during the courtship days. And we moved in Pocatello, it was called the U Club. It was formerly a fraternity club. And we lived in this little apartment and had wonderful neighbors. But I had to find a job because we got married on $60. And so with my high school education, I was able to work my entire life by the courses I took. And so I became a secretary, assistant to the secretary in a large equipment company there. And then he found a job after classes cleaning doctor's offices.
And so that put you through school, and Monty eventually went on to graduate school, yes?
Yeah, well, yes, he ended up in University of Utah.
Mm-hmm. As a pharmacist.
Uh-huh.
Yep. So when you first got married, can you kind of describe what the housing situation was like for young marrieds in the 1940s and what your expectations were?
That first apartment was something else. It had a booth that was our table. It was like a booth in a restaurant, a little booth. And I had a hot plate, and we had a ice box that took ice. By the time you put the ice in it, you could barely get the carrots and the lettuce in. But we had to have ice there. And then, being as it was a fraternity thing, it had the beds that had the straight wires across the links, whatever, and a 2-inch mattress. And of course, they were like barracks size. They were skinny. So, yeah, that was funny.
So there was no queen-size bed, king-size bed. The two of you were together in a little twin cot.
Yes, because there were two cots there. But Monty, I was a little naive at times. He just said, "Oh, we'll save this one for the guests, and we'll sleep in this one." So it was a spoon-shaped deal.
So he just wanted to cuddle. That's lovely. And you had a child while he was still at school, yes? So you had to do the job, the helping with the schooling, the raising a child. How did you balance everything?
What I did, I really didn't have Reg until we were almost married 4 years before I had my first son. And when I had the son, I stayed home. But I typed for some of the professors. I typed some of their works. Stayed home with him. But up until that time, I worked.
And so that's interesting. I didn't know that. So did you have any of those professors' papers that were particularly memorable, or something that you were like,
no, I just
learned from
remember
this?
their names. It was one was Dr. Swinner and one was Dr. Heiner. I remember their names, but I don't remember all that stuff. And it was on It was on Monty's little rinky-dink typewriter.
Yep.
That I still have.
So you only had boys. You had 2 boys, but you didn't have brothers, correct? You only had sisters.
No, just a sister.
So was there any adjustment in being a mom for boys versus growing up with only sisters?
No, that's really funny. My sister is 3.5 years younger than I am, and she was a boy. She loved all of the horses and stuff like that, and I was more the party girl. And so when she got married, she had 2 girls, and I had 2 boys. So we did a role reversal.
Oh, that's funny.
And I loved it.
Oh, that's
I didn't
great.
have Royal until we moved to Chico. Reg was born in Salt Lake.
And how did you end up here in Chico?
How did we end up here?
Yes.
Well, when Monty was going to pharmacy school, he helped open 2 brand new stores in Salt Lake. So he knew how to order stock and stock it and set all that stuff up besides his knowledge. And so he was offered a job in Roosevelt, Utah, and an opportunity to buy into that store. But we were only there 3 or 4 months. When he had a group of 4 that they studied together, and one of the woman that was in their study group was from Redding, and she called and she said, "Hey, Monty, you need to apply for the new drugstore in Chico, Sensible Pharmacy." And so he did, and actually, Mr. Bramwell, he was a member, but anyhow, he was the editor of Chico Enterprise.
Mm.
And so he hired money sight unseen because he was a church member and trusted us. So we accepted that, and we did not know where we were going to move to, what Chico was like, where in California it was. I can't believe we did that. That is scary.
I know, it's brave, it's bold, but you landed in such a good place.
We did. Perfect. It was, I know Heavenly Father led us to this area for sure. It's been the most wonderful place to raise children.
Mm-hmm. And you ended up on Penny Sue Lane, which for old Chicoans is all part of the Hignell Group homes.
Yes.
And you've been in the same house for how long now?
It's 70 years this year.
Wow.
We watched it being built. We lived on 8th Avenue, and across the street from us, the Sellers family lived. And then we had next door to us school teachers, and they introduced us to so many people. We joined a folk dancing club with them, met a lot of the people, and who are not members of the church. You meet the members of the church first and stuff. Mm-hmm. So our group of friends grew and grew and grew. And then we watched our home being built on Penny Sue.
Oh, and let's make everybody jealous. Do you remember what the down payment was on the house?
Yeah, we had to rake it up, too, because we didn't have it. It was $600.
And how much did the house cost you at that time?
It was $13,000.
$13,000. So that's pretty nice. Although, as you said, back in those days, that would have been difficult then.
Yeah, it would be kind. I don't know. They say it's all relative, but it doesn't look relative to me.
And given that you've been in the same house for 70 years, you have seen Chico change.
Oh.
What are your thoughts about that?
When we first moved to Chico, there was not quite 13,000. It was 12,000 something. And we swear that they rolled the sidewalks up at night. When nighttime came, they rolled up the sidewalks. But I just can't believe the changes. In fact, I don't even hardly know my town because there's so much growing on now even.
Yeah.
The changes were amazing. We even moved our store from 520 Broadway to the mall. And so we had to do that because of parking, not enough parking.
Yeah.
Yes. And we had different neighbors at different times that came in. And it is next to La Comida, and La Comida's still there. La Comida, Monty talked the owner of La Comida into taking some of our store because La Comida was being such a success, and it was only a single aisle. And so Mike finally said, okay, we'll take part of that. So we were there for quite a while, and then in 1976, we closed, and then 3 years later, we had Hawkley's Pharmacy on the Esplanade in the medical group.
Oh, very nice. Now, you kind of touched about meeting the members of the church first.
Uh-huh.
And, I'm not going to cry. You played such an important role in my family's membership. And I think that's true for a lot of people. And personally, one of my very first important jobs was with you when you were Stake Young Women's president, and we had to put together a tri-stake conference.
Wasn't that fun?
Everything I learned about organization, I still tell people Donna Hawkley taught me.
Oh.
Because you were amazing, and you worked so well with me. What are some of the other church callings you had that you really enjoyed?
My first calling was in the nursery with Pearl Sorensen.
Uh-huh.
That's a long time ago. And then I was a primary teacher. And then I was only a teacher for a short time, and they called me to be the primary president. And then I went into young women and taught their classes, and I was a ward president and stake president. And then I was called to be We had only been here probably 5 or 6 years. I was called the Big Relief Society president. And we only had the one ward there. Before we divided, there were 900 members. I had 57 visiting teaching districts, and we had 10 to 11 people on each district. And then those that couldn't go do their teaching, the presidency would go do those. But we never called anybody to tell them we were coming. We just said, oh, let's go teaching today, and we went to every house.
Wow, that's awesome. And Relief Society, even when I was a child, was a much bigger production in some respects than it is today.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about, I mean, it really was Relief Society. There were bazaars. There was, making of quilts. There was fundraising.
We held homemaking day. And then that was a whole day. It was in the middle of the week. We would get out the sewing machines and arts and crafts and do things for the bazaars. And I used to take my little ones, and they were always excited to help set up all the tables. And we had our noon meal, and it was like an 8-hour day. It was really nice. But then they had primary and mutual during the week, too, then.
Yeah, and you are such a go-getter that you kind of created your own job for right now. You want to tell people what you're doing and did today?
I just started my 21st year with the Solo Sisters, and they are the sisters that are single in our ward. My Bishop McNeese called me to this calling, and that previously it was called Super Sisters, and they had it on Sunday, and we had 3-hour meetings, and then would have that meeting, and we were limited. So when I was calling, I said, would it be possible for me to have the sisters come to my home on Monday, and we could have it during the day, but it would be our home evening, where we could nurture our friendships. We love the gospel. I promise we'll always have something spiritual, but we need to be unified in loving one another and being there for each other, and on a personal basis. And so he granted me that, and we're the only ward that's doing that, but we changed our name from Super Sisters to Solo Sisters, and we said that will be Sisters of Light occasionally, or sassy old ladies often.
Oh, I love that. I had not heard that before. So as a new member of the Solo Sisters, now I'm very happy. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I had them today.
Yes, you did. And you've had a couple other really fun experiences. You did seminary for a while, yes?
Oh, yes. I really had an experience with my seminary students. I always promised them, if you'll study with me, I'll play with you. So I would have parties at my house at different times. But this time I promised them that we could go on a bike hike. So we went, and it was a silver dollar fair going on and what have you. So we met at the church, and we rode our bikes to Durham to play ball. And so we got out there, and we were going to use the Little League field, but the Little Leaguers came. And so we had to go to the horse arena, and we had to make our own diamond and everything. And I said, guys, I just got over that skiing accident with the Crosbys, and so my leg is not up to running the infield. I'm going to pitch. So we had 2 or 3 innings, and then Sue Blair hit a line drive, hit me in the job, knocked me out, and I was down and out. And the next thing I knew, I had all these students throwing their coats on me. The Astle girl ran and called her mom in Durham, and she said, Sister Hawkley's either dead or knocked out, we don't know which. So the boys formed a little armchair for me and took me to the bleacher, and one of the Little Leaguers' mothers came over with a glass of ice for me, and I finally got to the payphone with all the students taking me, and I called Monty, and I said, We arrived here fine. I could hardly talk because my mouth was all screwed up. And I said, we're coming back, but I'm going to go straight to the hospital because, and he says, you stay right there. You're not going anywhere. And this was the day that the Warners were moving into our house because their house was sold and they were going to build a new house. So Monty called Kay and Debbie, and they came and got me and took me to the hospital. But I put Leon Fredrickson, who is president of the class, in charge of all my class, all those kids. And Monty said, tell them to stay there. And they got all the brethren to bring out their trucks to take the kids home with their bikes and stuff. And I broke my jaw in 3 places. It's on this side. I broke my jaw. I was wired shut for 2.5 months.
So Susan Blair is quite the athlete.
Yes, Sue's the batter.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was. And Monty thought, oh my, she won't be talking. And I said, oh yeah, you can talk. I can always talk. But I couldn't eat. And I would have died if it hadn't been for Kay Warner. Because she cooked the meals and pureed them. They had to remove a lot of teeth and stuff. And I had a bar through here and wired shut.
So isn't it interesting that God moved the Warners in right when you needed them?
Uh-huh.
That's
a tender
amazing.
mercy.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
You also had a great Laurel trip with your Laurels when you
yes.
were
my sweet Laurels. I've taught them several times. Well, speaking of seminary, though, Steve was in my seminary class.
Ah.
And he and Bart Blair, not Bart Blair, Bart Williams.
Bart Williams.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. Anyhow, we had fun at the parties. And they were always there. They were good kids. Loved them. And so when am I going back to which now?
The Laurel class
my Laurel.
trip.
Well, they wanted to go to the Hill Cumorah pageant. And I said, are you sure about that? So then I called all the parents and I said, this is what they'd like to do. This is what would be expected of you. And so we worked and had projects that we would have a car wash. And we would actually have a real car wash that they let us use and wash cars. And we would have fashion shows, and we would have a huge dinner every month, and we kept raising funds like that. But if that Laurel didn't participate in that fundraising thing, she didn't get her share. And then we had individual ones where they would do homework, they would irons for somebody or something like that. So it took us a year, and I was told by many adults, you should never promise youth something you can't do. But I just plugged along, and we ended up with a tour bus in Salt Lake, and the owners of that bus, the tour group, was amazing, because I found out when I was making all the preparations that the wife's owner, or the owner's wife, was Monty's babysitter at one time. So there's another tender mercy. The kids didn't want to go with the BYU group. They wanted to go with just normal people, all different ages, and it was wonderful. So we went for 3 weeks on this tour. We stopped every night and stayed at a motel or a hotel, and a Best Western or something like that. And then we got to the Hill Cumorah pageant a day early, so we got to see it twice. But it also wasn't just a church history. We got to do all the church history and the nation's history, and we went on to New York, and it was a 3-week trip. And we made it.
3-week trip. That is amazing.
And I had the girls every night write in their journal what their day was like.
That's wonderful.
It was wonderful.
Now, to a sadder moment, you lost Monty quite a while ago, and I think that's part of where the whole Solo Sisters has come from.
Yes, it is. Monty passed away February the 8th, 1989, 35 years ago.
Wow. So that's a long time.
Yeah, he was ill for a long time, but he was smart enough to listen to his body. Lasted longer than the doctors ever thought, but he was in and out of ICU many times.
That's hard.
I still miss him, but I talk to him every day,
That's good.
and he smiles at me all the time.
I'm sure he does, because you guys really had a great marriage.
Oh, we did. We had a wonderful marriage. Yeah.
That's wonderful. And you've been service-oriented all your life.
Yes, I just love being with people and doing things.
Now, I have to bring up one last thing, because it was my mother's favorite thing that you owned, which is your cabin up in Chester that my mother loved to go to and that you used to take the women to on your little retreats.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the Hawkley famous cabin?
It was Hawkley's famous cabin. We had it for 55 years, and it was up out of Chester in it was up toward the park, so that actually our backyard, our line was with Lassen Park.
Oh, nice.
And so, and a lot of people would go up to Drake's Bed. That's a resort on up further. But it was just a little cabin. We had, it had a loft and a pull-down stairs, and we had 3 double beds there. It had a bedroom with a double bed. And then we had and would be called the great room, which is not really great, but it, with our stove and our round table and a twin bed that we called the cookie couch, and a couch that had a roll-out bed. We had lots of things that we could do, and an indoor bathroom. So it was a little red cabin in the woods, and it was a piece of heaven. The best thing we ever did, because we had so many family things there, and every summer I would take all of my grandchildren by myself, and we would spend a week, and we hiked the mountains and hiked in Lassen Park and played games outside and built things and made things, and the Warners were in with us, and so our 2 families were always together. And then we had couples that we would take up to go golfing, and then I always took the ladies up every summer, and it was paradise. But Dixie Fire decided to claim it, so I don't have that anymore.
And I know how hard that is for you, because that
Really
was
hard.
so central to your family history and adventures.
It is. My granddaughter Melissa had her friend, who was an artist, do a painting of my cabin.
Oh,
With everything, and I have it placed across the room for me when I sit on my recliner, that I can see it. And I get tears every time I look at it, but they're happy tears. Yeah. It unified our family, our friends.
Yes.
And we shared it with our loved ones, and it was wonderful.
and you love your family, and I've never met anyone with more pictures of their family than
It's a
you have of
grandma's
yours.
house. It's a grandma's
It is a
house.
grandma's house, which is delightful. And you still keep in touch with all of your grandchildren now, yes?
Yes, I have 13 grandchildren. I have 38 living great-grandchildren, 2 deceased, and 1 great-great. And I have 8x10s of their families in my house. So every morning I go in the family room and say good morning, and they all smile.
I love that. And how do you stay connected with them?
Oh, they are so wonderful. Like, they call me. I had a call from Cooper, who's in the Air Force today. Melissa calls me every night. They just call me all the time, and it's nice. And I never forget a birthday, and I've been able to remember them so far.
And kind of our last 2 ideas, we haven't really talked about your testimony of the gospel. And do you think the gospel has played a part in creating that closeness in your family?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. My testimony, was at a young age. My both of my grandmothers. I didn't have a grandpa. They died early, but their teachings were, our grandmothers spent a lot of time with their grandchildren. And so I remember some of the little prayers that they did and everything. But it was really, when everything came together, I was probably when I was between 13 and 14 from one of my mutual teachers. She lit a fire in me that just wouldn't ever stop. And it was wonderful. I was raised with goodly parents, but my parents didn't even go through the temple till Monty and I had been married 14 years because my dad smoked, and he finally gave up. His most wonderful dad ever, but so I was so thrilled to have that happen. But I have a very strong testimony. I know my Savior lives, and I know Heavenly Father lives, and I have had special experiences with the Holy Ghost that comforts me, and especially at Monty's leaving. I know that the Holy Ghost surrounded me, and he didn't ever leave until he told me I was capable to go ahead.
Oh,
and
interesting.
I cannot. There are no words that can express that bubble that was around me.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Now, by the time this airs, you will be 96 years old.
Yep.
And you are sharp as a tack. Anyone who knows you are in charge and you are brilliant.
Well, I'm trying to be, but I'm a lot slower than I was, and I'm wearing out. And every day when I pray, I tell Father, some of my parts are wearing out, but they still work. Thank you, thank you.
Well, my nephew David refers to you as the original Energizer Bunny, which I think is true. So in your 96 years of wisdom, what would be your final message to those watching this webcast, to your friends, to your family? What would you want to leave?
I would tell them to be true to yourself at all times, never deny yourself, and to speak with your Heavenly Father every day, and to thank Him every day, and to be aware of all He has given you, and to approach Him with a thankful heart. And when you have challenges, work with it, not against it.
Donna, it has been an honor to be able to interview you, and I just adore you. So thank you so much.
I love you too, you know that.
I do.